Hey everyone, thanks for coming back to another episode of Getting to Know the Speaker for Flow Factor Conference 2019. For me, it's May 30th. Hopefully for you, it's somewhere, I guess, after May 30th, but our event's coming up just around the corner. And so today I have Dylan Gregersen of WeWork with us. Hey, Dylan.
Hey.
And yeah, so we're just going to get started and jump in. Dylan's got a really good talk that he's going to be doing at Flow Factor, and can't wait to kind of jump in and get to know him a little bit. So Dylan, why don't we start off with a little bit of background. Tell us about you, kind of where you came from, sort of how you got to where you are today.
Okay. Yeah, so I've been doing data for a little over 8 years now. And really where I started, though, was actually doing astronomy research. So I got my degree at the University of Utah in physics. And as part of that, I wanted to really get into some sort of research, something that was live and being done. And so I ended up picking astronomy, which turns out to just be data science. You spend a night or 2 nights with a giant telescope, or maybe you use Hubble Space Telescope to get some images of some sort of celestial astronomical thing. And then the rest of it's 2 years of taking those images, pulling them in, analyzing them, modeling them, and trying to learn something about the universe. And so that was really where I got started. Was, okay, here's some data about stars is where I was actually
cool.
started out. And then learned how to program in Fortran, learned how to program in Python, and how to do some data analysis and modeling. And so I did that for a while, and then transitioned over to working at Team, which was then recently acquired by WeWork. And what I've been doing here is a lot of the same data processing techniques, though I've been able to refine it a lot more into sort of a business setting where you're creating some sort of product that people are going to use. And really the problem we're trying to solve is, how are people using the workplace? Is our employees getting the most out of their workplace, and what can we do to help support the work that's being done? And what that looks like in practice is focusing on conference room behavior and where people are meeting and if they can. Team built quite a few tools around this, particularly a room display that you can walk up to and reserve a meeting room. And then my team, I've been part of a small team where we took the data about meeting rooms and about meetings that are happening within large organizations, and have distilled that down into the actionable pieces that people can actually go out and make changes in their workplace. So some sort of IT manager or HR can go in and get some insights into their workplace and be able to do something.
Cool. So I would say, based on my experience with corporate meeting rooms, it's how do I connect my computer is always that, and then how do I schedule the room? Those seem to be the two biggest things. So
yeah.
All right. So why don't we talk a little bit about how a company might get involved analyzing their data. You talked about what Team, now WeWork, was doing about analyzing conference room behavior. And obviously your astronomy work would have had a lot of data to look at. But talk to us a little bit about what you see companies doing, or how companies might get started with that.
Yeah, and this is really a core part of the talk as well, is really starting with your data foundations and making sure that you have clean pipelines. And then I talk a little bit more about how do you progress that and add complexity through it. And so it's really trying to go from where you might not have much or might have something that's kind of messy to getting to AI or getting to some sort of optimization state. And the challenge is through there. And a lot of the times, the challenge is not technological. It's not which database you use. It's mostly about the people challenges and how we go about doing the work and communicating about it and planning it out. So in the talk as well, I lay out kind of a framework that I use, and then really opening it up for discussion. A lot of this industry of data is very new. So like, you think about how many times Amazon still makes mistakes about what recommendations you should get and what sort of things you should buy. They have unlimited money to throw at this problem, and it's still new. They're still dealing with a lot of challenges, and all of us that are dealing in this space are kind of trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I make data work for us? How do I use data to solve problems? And there's a lot to be figured out with just how we go about doing that.
Okay. Yeah, well, as you were saying that, it got me thinking a little bit. If I know that I want to sort of make intelligent decisions about something, and I'm trying to think of a good example for us to talk about, but the question that comes to mind is, how do I know what data I need to help influence the decision? Because you mentioned about collecting the right data. I feel like, for example, if we just digress for a second to like adopting a microservices architecture, or back in the day moving to Agile, some people have no idea what to do to even start. They know, hey, there's this thing I'd like. In this case, I would like a software program to help me make decisions. So I know I want to do that. And I maybe know I want to make decision X. Those are the only two things I know. I don't know what to do to get started.
Yeah.
Any recommendations for how you might start asking questions that identifies the data that would feed into that problem?
Yeah, I think asking questions, trying to like our brains are a great. We store models of the world like in our brains, and so when you think about like, okay, how many users like a particular product? Well, I know that when a user visits a page, there's a likelihood a page of a particular product. Like this is for in retail space, this is very obvious. So like the way Amazon works, you have a page that represents a product, and if somebody looked at that page, then that probably means they like it. So when I'm looking at that sort of problem, the first thing I'd want to track is, okay, what are the metrics I need to track? Well, the user and what page they viewed. And the recommendation is really to keep it simple and iterate. So keep it simple to a few metrics that you start with. Make sure that there are metrics that you can count. So the first thing you're starting to is just like number of users over maybe a time range. And so now you're into multiple dimensions where you have time and just a count of users. And keeping it simple, and then figuring out what you can and can't answer, and then iterating on it and adding more into it. Because even those first few pieces that you put into place are usually a lot of overhead. And if you try to add every possibility of what you think might be useful, you'll probably get bogged down in your implementation.
Okay, very cool. Cool. Well, that's a great segue, I think, and you already touched on this a little bit, but your session is called AI Hierarchy of Needs. Can you give us a little preview about what people might expect when they come to your session?
Yeah, I mean, you can expect a fairly high-level talk. So this is not a in the weeds, use this AI library and deploy it in this way. I'm not advocating particular infrastructure in this talk. This talk is really a high level, how do we structure the approach to doing data? How do we decide what problems are useful and worth exploring? How do we decide, how do we communicate timelines, and how do we think about delivering like building up an AI infrastructure or a data science infrastructure where you're iterating on it over time. So adding more complexity and creating good benchmarks where you can show the value of what you're doing along the way.
Okay, awesome. That sounds great. And just to repeat something you mentioned at the beginning of that, This is, so we have different tracks at the event: management, operations, dev productivity, those kind of things. And so you're saying that pretty much anybody coming to the event really could drop in and get a bit better understanding of what AI is about, and more importantly, what your data needs would be. Is that right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, perfect. Okay, and then just before we wrap up, something I've been asking everybody about is a little Easter egg, a question that you might want those listening to us to ponder, and then something for the two of you, or the more of you when you are at the event, to talk about a little bit. So what is your question for everybody listening?
My question is, what problem are you trying to solve?
Awesome. I love it. That's great for kind of everything, right? I think pretty much anything in life. What problem are you trying to solve? So awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dylan. Appreciate having you here and that we could get together, and can't wait to see you on June 11th.
Yeah, looking forward to it.
Bye-bye.